cool. Okay. My chart's not showing. I'm not entirely sure why. What? This is cool, I guess. I don't know what's happening. Why did this happen? Okay, anyway, so I want to make a 5-part robot. I want the head, I want the 2 arms, and I want the legs, and then we have the body. Now, I don't know how it's going to be shaped, but what I do know is the bottom will be here. Oh, you know what? That's a great concern. That would mean the body size would always have to be different, or the arms will always be inside of the body. Okay, I don't know. We'll figure this out later. Cursor to selected, selected to selected to cursor. That's not quite what I wanted. Alright. Selection to grid. Oh, sorry. Okay. Whoops. Wonderful. The first one, the first robot type machine thing that I want to make would be a ninja. Whoops. Control R. There we go. I don't want that one. I haven't actually planned this one out yet. What is different? Oh, this piece. All right, let's try. Smooth edges. Oops. Apparently I missed something. Don't know what that was though. That's so weird looking. Okay, alright. First of all, no, not Command S, Command Z. First of all, let's save this. Twitch chat, okay, there we go. Save as. This is going to be 4 or 5, we'll say 6. Robot 6 dot robots. And I don't know what it's going to be called yet. Let's go to NPR News. Prefer to listen to the news while I'm working.
And at first the character of Aaron was I feel like she was a bit more. Well, first of all, she was a brunette, which I was like, oh, I have to dye my red hair, but I actually loved having brown hair, and she was more serious and a little bit more sarcastic, I think, at the beginning, and then I fear that as the writers got to know me, they sort of made Erin weirder. So that's sort of how she morphed into the weirdo rube that she became.
I want to ask you a little bit about your background. You were born in Kansas City and grew up in St. Louis. Famously, when you were in high school for a short time, John Hamm was a drama teacher of yours. He taught improv.
Yes,
I will figure this out.
And I feel sorry for him because I talk about him all the time. He's probably like, stop mentioning my name. No, he would never say that because he's the kindest man that there is. He attended my school, my high school, John Burroughs, and then went to college and came back after college and taught theater at our high school for a year. So I was a freshman in taking a ninth grade, I think it was just called Introduction to Theater course, and he taught the improv portion of that class. The central tenet of improv, listening and responding, it's sort of encapsulated as yes and, which means that you always say yes to your scene partner and build on it. And he's the one who first told me, or told our class, about that idea. And so because later in life I learned to love that whole idea so much, I think it's very nice that he was sort of the first person to introduce that to me. But he is a great person. Everyone in St. Louis adores him, and I've called him the Prince of St. Louis before, and rightfully so. And everyone there wants to claim responsibility and ownership of him. They're like, well, he was like me. I'm like, well, he was my teacher. Other people are like, well, I knew him. He wrote a play once with me. But everyone there adores him.
I'm guessing he was just starting his career as an actor then, and I'm also guessing, a high school teacher. I would think lots of high school girls would think he's dreamy, just in the same way as, one after another secretary found Don Draper dreamy in the same way. Was that the case? Was it kind of like that?
I was so much younger than he was. I was 14, or I still am so much younger than, no biggie, so much younger than he is. I think that there was such a large gap. It did seem very much like, oh, he's my teacher. And our class was kind of like, oh, this is Mr. Ham. I don't know, maybe the senior girls felt a little differently because they were closer in age. But it was so crazy once we started seeing his face on, buses and billboards and as Don Draper, which was just like, wait a minute, that's Mr. Ham. He's this, arresting matinee idol. And I think it was so cool to see that. And by the way, I have to tell you that I came out to Los Angeles to put on this one-person show I had been staging, trying to get an agent and a job. And I was in Los Angeles doing it, and this was the first season that he was on Mad Men, and I emailed him just to see if he might remember me and if he would come support me at my show. And he wrote right back, and he was front row in that show wearing his St. Louis Blues hat, and it was he's sort of, I will say, he sort of stole the spotlight a little bit. Everyone was like, John Hamm's here. But that was fine with me.
Well, Ellie Kemper, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Ellie Kemper spoke with Fresh Air producer Anne-Marie Baldonado. Kemper stars in the Netflix series Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Tomorrow on Fresh Air, we talk about a chapter of early American history many of us know little about: slavery in the New England colonies. Colonists enslaved and exported Native Americans and imported African slaves. My guest will be Wendy Warren.
Do I really want this many?
Slavery and colonization in early America. She teaches history at Princeton University. I hope you'll join us.
1, 2. Do I really want?
Fresh Air's executive producer is Danny Miller. Our technical director and engineer is Audrey Bentham. Our associate producer for online media is Molly Seavey-Nesper. Roberta Shurock directs the show. I want to thank Dave Davies for doing such a great job hosting last week while I took some time off. I'm Terry Gross.
Alright, so I want to see if I can somehow make this
Support for NPR comes from NPR member stations and from the estate of Branna and Irving Sissenween, supporting the collaborative news gathering model of NPR and member station newsrooms, which seek to create a network that reflects and illuminates the fabric of America.
That's cool.
And from Progressive Insurance, with insurance for cars, home, boat, motorcycles, RVs, and commercial vehicles. At 1-800-PROGRESSIVE and progressive.com.
I haven't done this in a
This
while.
is Minnesota Public Radio News. Coming up, we have some weather details, also some news, regional stories in just a few moments. Following that, NPR News Presents. Stay with us.
Programming is supported by Top Shelf, makers of custom suits and shirts and many sartorial accessories, dedicated to making custom tailoring fun and entertaining. You can visit their store at Lake and Lindale, online at topshelfinc.com.
Twin Cities forecast calling for clear skies overnight with a low around 60, west winds 5 to 10 miles an hour. Nice summer day tomorrow, mostly sunny with a high in the low 80s on Tuesday. Tuesday night could see some shower or thunderstorm activity after midnight, a lingering chance of showers on Wednesday with a high in the upper 70s. Thursday, sunny and upper 70s across the metro area. That's your forecast from Minnesota Public Radio.
Programming is supported by Bombshell, a boutique dedicated to fashion in sizes 14 to 24 on Grand Avenue in St. Paul and online at bomb-shell-boutique.com. Bombshell, for the woman with style and substance.
This is NPR News Presents. Today we're headed to Washington, D.C. for a live broadcast from the National Press Club. The head of the Federal Communications Commission will be talking about next generation wireless, net neutrality, the future of broadcasting, and other mysteries of our rapidly changing communication technologies. Stay tuned for FCC head Tom Wheeler live from the National Press Club after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Spear. Investigators looking into the mass shooting in Orlando say that during a 3-hour period after officers arrived on the scene of the nightclub shooting, there were no shots fired. Orlando Police Chief John Mina at a news conference today noting all of the first responders acted appropriately.
We have been training for this situation for many, many years, since Columbine, since 9/11. I knew our officers were ready. I knew our SWAT team members were ready. I knew our hospitals were ready. And yes, it's a very difficult decision to make, but it was the right decision at the right time, and I stand by that, and we make the same decision standing here today.
Mina says gunman Omar Mateen exchanged shots with police when they first arrived before barricading himself inside a bathroom in the club. Mateen, after killing 49 people and wounding many more, was shot and killed as officers burst into the building around 5:15 a.m. on June 12th. The U.S. Supreme Court today left in place gun control laws in Connecticut and New York that ban military-style assault weapons like the one used in the Orlando massacre. As NPR's Nina Totenberg explains, the court's action was in keeping with similar steps it's taken in recent years.
In 2008, the High Court ruled for the first time that there's an individual right to own a gun for self-defense in one's home. A view it reiterated in 2010. But the justices
Maybe it
at the
works
same time said
for
the
some
Second Amendment right to bear
circles.
arms, like other rights, can be limited by reasonable regulations. In the 6 years since then, the court has repeatedly refused to disturb lower court decisions upholding regulations on military assault-type weapons and where and how weapons can be carried outside the home. The state laws that the court left undisturbed today are among the strictest in the nation. They were enacted in 2012 after a gunman with a semi-automatic rifle killed 20 children and 6 teachers and administrators at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Nina Totenberg, NPR News, Washington.
A shakeup today at the highest levels of the Donald Trump for President staff. Campaign manager Corey Lewandowski was fired. NPR's Don Gandhi has the story.
Lewandowski was a political operative with no real national profile prior to becoming Trump's campaign manager more than a year ago. He is brash and outspoken, not unlike his candidate, and helped Trump outlast a large field of GOP presidential hopefuls. But lately, the campaign has been plagued by infighting as more experienced hands were hired in advance of the general election. Now Lewandowski is out. He told CNN he doesn't know why, but cast it in a positive light.
It's really
hold on,
important to
let
know
me
that there are highs and lows in every campaign.
pause this.
Welcome to this quick tip from LinuxCookie.com. My name is Jonathan Williamson, and today I want to show you a comparison of 3 different ways of getting sharp corners with hard surface forms in Blender when we're modeling. So these 3 methods are creases, edge splits, and proximity loops. So let's look at the first one, which is creases. So selecting the model here, let's just zoom right in on it. You can see that I have this shape. All the shapes are identical, and it looks alright, except that we've got some surface shading that's kind of weird, but the overall form is nice. We've got a subdivision surface modifier at level 2. If we go into edit mode, we can see that we have very, very simple geometry. You know, it's just pure faces. And so this works very well. We've got these creases, which we can set creases. If we select an edge, hit N to bring up our properties panel, and adjust the crease setting right here, so we can go from 0 to 1. And just as a good example, let's take a look at, say, this edge. And so if we in here set this to 0, you can see that top becomes really nice and rounded. Setting it to 1 creates it nice and sharp. You can also adjust creases by selecting your edge and hitting Shift-E, and then going from 0 to 1 as well. So these are all fine and dandy, but you'll notice that in object mode, we've got pretty nasty shading. You know, these corners definitely show off, and if we look at our actual mesh, you know, if I turn off optimal display, that's a fairly decent geometry density for this shape. You know, it shouldn't be much more complex than that. You know, it's nice that this is really simple, but the shading is not good. And this shading is going to show up at render time. You know, we're going to see these kind of blurred edges. It's just not going to look very good. We can get around that by just increasing the number of subdivisions within our modifier. So if we go all the way up to, say, 5, then it starts looking really nice. You know, the higher we go, the nicer it gets. There it just looks really crisp and clean, and it's really very nice. But we've also made our mesh just incredibly dense, where suddenly we have all of these edges in these other areas that maybe we don't need. So probably the best way to do this would simply be use a low subdivision count, say 2 in the viewport, and then set your render time all the way to 6. But so that way it'll still look good at render time, but you're going to have a lot of geometry in there. So in my personal opinion, this is not an optimal solution. So let's look at number 2. So number 2 uses an edge split modifier combined with the subdivision surfaces. So first, let's just turn these off one at a time. So first we have our mesh, and on that mesh we have set creases just like we did here. And the creases work to give us these sharp corners when we add the sub Ds. But then we want to clean up the shading here. And this is where then the edge split modifier comes into place. We turn this on, and now it becomes really crisp and clean because we've set it to work on sharp edges. So anything that's been
edge split modifier. Now that's pretty cool. Hey, that's sort of good. Okay, clear sharp, mark sharp, mark sharp. Did I say shark? Mark sharp. Do want to give it a robot type look. Okay. I don't know. This seems pretty good. Sort of. We have a few problems. Crease. Sharp. That didn't really select all of the sharp edges. Whoa. I meant to select. How about now? Select sharp edges. Ho! That was scary. Why is it only selecting some of them? I don't get it. Okay, let's see how this goes. In the meantime, I think might be good if I just took out these edge loops. Seems good. Okay, so wait, what happened? Let's put that back on.
To plant waterers, you can be sure of only one thing. The biggest Internet of Things application has yet to be imagined. Yes, 5G will connect the unconnected and compete with the uncompetitive. Millions of Americans can't access high-speed connectivity because it's too costly to run the fiber to the home. Verizon CEO Lowell McAdam has begun speaking lately about using 5G connectivity to expand high-speed broadband service to rural areas. And fiber-fast wireless connectivity will deliver the long-sought goal of competitive high-speed internet access for consumers. But let's stop the imagining for a moment. Here's the key. The interconnected world that we live in today is the result of decisions made a decade ago. The interconnected world of the future will be the result of decisions we must make today. And that is why 5G is a national priority, and why this Thursday I am circulating to my colleagues proposed new rules that will identify and open up vast amounts of spectrum for 5G applications. We call it the Spectrum Frontiers proceeding, and we will vote on it on July 14th. Our 5G proposal, is the final piece in the spectrum trifecta of low-band, mid-band, and high-band airwaves that will open up unprecedented amounts of spectrum, speed the rollout of next-generation wireless networks, and redefine network connectivity for years to come. I'm confident that the actions will lead to a cornucopia of unanticipated, innovative uses and will generate tens of billions of dollars in economic activity. But let's revisit that spectrum strategy for a moment. Rule number one is that the technology should drive the policy rather than the policy drive the technology. And technology for 5G is not one thing, it is many things. The marriage of Moore's Law and wireless connectivity involves smart antenna systems, new, more efficient transmission formats, low-energy systems, network virtualization, and much more. And on the spectrum side, these technologies require new access to spectrum in multiple bands. The wireless future will not be a one-size-fits-all future. So our spectrum trifecta begins with low-band spectrum that is optimal for wide area coverage applications. At this very moment, we're in the midst of the world's first incentive auction to make greenfield low-band spectrum available. The broadcasters have stepped up to bring spectrum to the market. Shortly, the wireless industry will have the opportunity to fulfill their repeated requests for more spectrum with this beachfront spectrum. Mid-band spectrum is kind of the Jan Brady of the spectrum world. You know, the overlooked middle child. But its characteristics enable an order of magnitude increase in spectrum efficiency. The Commission's recent AWS 3 and new Citizens Broadband Radio Service in 3.5 gigahertz were landmarks in using new sharing tools to open up new mid-band spectrum, and we need to continue looking for other mid-band opportunities. And it's high-band spectrum that will be the focus of our actions next month. These bands, the high bands, offer huge swaths of spectrum for super fast data rates with low latency, and are now becoming unlocked because of technological advances in computing and antennas. If the Commission approves my proposal next month, the United States will be the first country in the world to open up high-band spectrum for 5G networks and applications. And that's damn important, because it means that U.S. companies will be the first out of the gate.
Think, how should I
We'll be repeating the formula that made the United States the world leader in 4G. It's a simple formula. Lead the world in spectrum availability, encourage and protect innovation driving competition, and stay out of the way of technological development. Unlike some countries, we do not believe that we should spend the next couple of years studying what 5G should be or how it should operate and how to allocate spectrum based on those assumptions. Like the examples I gave earlier, the future has a way of inventing itself, turning innovators loose, is far preferable to expecting committees and regulators to define the future. We won't wait for the standards to be first developed in the sometimes arduous standard-setting process or in government-led activity. Instead, we will make ample spectrum available and then rely on a private sector-led process for producing technical standards best suited for those frequencies and use cases. Leadership in networks leads to leadership in uses, which quickly moves across borders. So a result of this national leadership is the creation of a home field advantage, similar to what we knew in 4G. But the main value of 5G will not be found in work share or intellectual property. The main value of 5G, by orders of magnitude, will be in consumption rather than production. It will be in material gains and improvements in the quality of life and economic opportunity. And I would also emphasize that the development of 5G is not anything like an international zero-sum game. Rather, it's a contest in which everyone can win. Our success and that of others redounds to the benefit, literally, of everyone in the world. We're already seeing industry gearing up to seize this opportunity. I have seen 5G hardware and firmware. The technology is here. It is also important, however, to recognize that 5G technology will be a constant evolution. It would be a mistake to think that 5G can be frozen in a snapshot. It's more like a video with many new scenes, all building on each other. The systems and standards for 5G will be continually improving and evolving. And on the network side, Verizon and AT&T tell us they'll begin deploying 5G trials in 2017. And these efforts will, of course, help inform the standards process by putting stakes in the ground. And the first commercial deployments they're talking about are expected in 2020. This timeline requires that we act to pave the path today. With the new rules that I am proposing in our Spectrum Frontiers order, we take our most significant step yet down the path to our 5G future. The big game changer is that 5G will use much higher frequency bands than previously thought viable for mobile broadband and other applications. Such millimeter wave signals have physical properties that are both a limitation and a strength. They tend to travel best in narrow and straight lines, and they do not go through physical objects as well. This means that very narrow signals in an urban environment tend to bounce around buildings and other obstacles, making it difficult to connect to a moving point. But brilliant engineers have developed new antennas that can aim and amplify signals, coupled with sophisticated processing that allows a moving device to pick up all of the signals that are bouncing around and create one coherent connection. Now, to make this work, the 5G build-out is going to be very infrastructure intensive, requiring massive deployment of small cells. But it also opens up unprecedented opportunities for frequency reuse in denser, more localized networks. The ability to use this high-frequency spectrum opens much bigger chunks of spectrum. Current blocks of licensed low-band spectrum are usually 5 to 10 megahertz in width. With 5G, however, we're talking about blocks of spectrum that are at least 200 megahertz in width. And this will allow the networks to carry much more traffic per user. Gigabits of throughput in place of megabits of throughput. And the key point here is that by opening up these higher frequency bands, we're making available more licensed spectrum for mobile than in the cumulative history dating back to Reed Hunt that the FCC has heretofore made available. And we're not done. As part of our July 14 action, we also plan to ask for comments on opening up other high-frequency bands. And what we'll be considering on July 14th is not just licensed spectrum. Unlicensed will continue to play a critical role in future 5G networks. And our plan proposes a massive 14 gigahertz unlicensed band. Consider that, 14,000 megahertz of unlicensed spectrum with the same flexible use rules that allowed unlicensed to become a breeding ground for innovation. Opening up spectrum and offering flexibility to operators and innovators is the most important thing that we can do to enable the 5G revolution. But it's not the only thing. We also need to work our way through spectrum sharing issues. Sharing is essential for the future of spectrum utilization. Many of the high-frequency bands that we will make available for 5G currently have some satellite users, as well as some Defense Department applications, or at least the possibility of future satellite and defense users. This means sharing will be required between satellite and terrestrial wireless, an issue that is especially relevant in the 28 gigahertz band. It is also a consideration of the additional bands that we will identify for future exploration. We will strike a balance that offers flexibility for satellite users to expand while providing terrestrial licensees with predictability about the areas in which satellites will locate. However, we must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole provenance of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country. 3 months ago, I indicated as directly as I am capable that it would be advantageous for the satellite and mobile industries to come together to propose realistic ideas for their coexistence in the upper bands, and to do so quickly. Satellite and terrestrial stakeholders have suggested a range of sharing options, and the draft Spectrum Frontiers Order seeks to provide a balanced solution that addresses the needs of both parties. I am confident that we will adopt rules that will enable satellite, terrestrial, and federal operations to coexist and thrive. To make sure that we have this connectivity with high-band spectrum will require a lot more small cells, which means a lot more antenna siting decisions by local governments. That's why it's important that the Commission has strengthened our environmental and historical preservation rules and tightened our shot clock for siting application reviews. America's local governments will play an important role in determining how we fulfill this national priority. In addition, all the small cells need to be connected, so we'll need a lot more backhaul. That's a challenge that we're going to address through our proceeding on business data services, the kind of dedicated access that wireless providers need to connect cell towers and antennas to their networks. These backhaul connections can be as much as 30% of the cost of operating a wireless network. And with the additional sites required to support the use of millimeter wave spectrum, that percentage is likely to increase to as much as 50%. But in many areas, competition in the supply of backhaul remains limited. And that can translate into higher prices for wireless networks and then higher prices for consumers. Lack of competition doesn't just hurt the deployment of wireless networks today. It threatens as well the delay of the build-out of 5G networks, with the demand for many, many more backhaul connections to many, many more antenna. Before the end of this year, the Commission will take up a reform proposal supported by all the nation's leading wireless carriers, save one, that will encourage innovation and investment in business data services while ensuring that lack of competition in some places cannot be used to hold 5G hostage. As we build the next generation network, a lesson learned from our previous experiences is that it must be secure. So this is the third leg of the stool. New platforms, systems, software, and technologies will mean new vulnerabilities. Cybersecurity issues must be addressed during the design phase of the entire 5G ecosystem, including devices. This will place a premium on collaboration amongst all stakeholders. We continue to prefer an approach that emphasizes that industry develops cybersecurity standards, just as we have done in the wired networks. But security is an essential component of where we go on networks, and we will have the ability to think about it first as a forethought rather than an afterthought. So in conclusion, in the spirit of the election season, I thought I'd close these remarks by referencing a campaign speech from the 60s. Now, a lot of my friends here think I'm going to be talking about the 1860s. But actually, I'm talking about the 1960s, because on July 15, 1960, John F. Kennedy strode to the podium at the Los Angeles Coliseum to accept the Democratic nomination for president. And he famously challenged the American people to be pioneers of a new frontier. He spoke of harnessing the power of the technological revolution and exploring uncharted areas of science and space. JFK's vision charted a path that took us to the moon and laid out the foundation of the internet. This July 14th, 56 years less one day from when JFK talked about the new frontier, we will have the opportunity to take an historic step to open up yet another frontier that promises to propel our nation and the world forward. Once again, we're looking to the sky to unlock new discoveries and unleash American ingenuity. We are the pioneers of a new spectrum frontier. Working together, we can write this next chapter in the mobile revolution, a revolution that has already transformed our lives and society. Working together, we can unleash new waves of innovation and discovery that we have yet to imagine. Thank you very much.
This is NPR News Presents with the head of the Federal Communications Commission, Tom Wheeler, speaking today at the National Press Club in Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll note that I'll use the wireless microphone. You can have the hardwired.
It's not fast enough, this is the problem.
Tell me, for the American consumer who's not in this room right now, it may seem that 4G is just in its infancy. We've just seen television ads in the last year or so about that. So why is 5G so urgently important?
It's a great question, Tommy, and it goes back. I had one line that really deserves further explanation. All of the things that powerful computing makes possible can't be done on the chip on a handset. They have to be moved to a centralized place that we have now come to call the cloud, so that the work gets done up there in the cloud and it is connected to the less powerful computing power in our handsets, or, as I said, our pill bottles or automatic watering systems. And that connection is what 5G is all about. It has to be fast, it has to be latency free, and it has to be secure. And if we can't move at high speeds between that power and its use, then we will not be able to bring that power into our hands and other places.
Well, that leads to the next question, which is you've talked about the cloud quite a bit here. How concerned are you about cyber terrorism, and are we doing enough to prevent it as we move forward?
So I think we have to recognize that networks have always been a pathway for attack. I don't care whether they were roads or waterways. All right? It's always been a path for attack. And so the current networks are no different, which places on those who build and operate the networks and those who oversee that activity a special responsibility. Under the leadership of Admiral Dave Simpson, we have moved forward aggressively with a program that works with those who are running networks to meet agreed to performance standards, if you will, as to how you secure those networks, and then to have the ability to check that that's happening, and the ability to, from that experience, be able to share with everybody else. We have been playing catch-up ball. The issue is, look at this, my phone's ringing. This is the power of the connected network, folks, the ever-connected network. The issue is that that we now, with 5G, know the threat and have an opportunity to address it from the get-go.
Okay, we talked about how the United States is leading when it comes to 5G. What are other countries doing, and how do we maintain that leadership spot compared to Europe or somewhere else?
So the European Union, China, Japan, and South Korea have all signed a memorandum of understanding that they would all work together to develop 5G. The European Union has put up 700 million euros to do 5G research. As I referenced in my remarks, we think that's the wrong way to go. We think that the making the spectrum available and standing out of the way of technology development is far better than, well, let's sit around and wait till we decide what it's going to do and then make the spectrum available, and let's micromanage the technology process. Right. That's not the way that we're going to be approaching it.
Are there lessons to be learned from the rollout of 4G technology in the U.S. and elsewhere that will apply to the start of 5G?
Oh, that's
sure,
one problem.
There are lots of them, not the least of which is
maybe not.
The wireless network relies on base stations. They're going to have more base stations than ever before, and the wireless network relies on wired connections, which is why we're moving on this business data services proceeding to make sure that those connections are charged for fairly and are competitive. The interesting thing about moving from 3G to 4G was it was kind of like throwing a switch. And, okay, we're moving over here to new spectrum. There's a whole new set of expectations. I think 5G, as I said, is not going to be a one-size-fits-all. It's going to be multiple pieces of spectrum. It's going to be multiple technologies, and they are constantly going to be evolving. So I think that we can follow the 4G playbook in terms of how we get national leadership, and that's why it is a national priority. But that the 5G execution on that playbook becomes one of constant innovation, constant improvement, that American technology can lead the way.
As I was talking about when we started question time, Americans and consumers are just finally kind of seeing what 4G may offer. It seems like there's a lot of talk about what 5G is. Is this a branding exercise you're starting now? And do you think that we will be able to identify what 5G is to consumers?
I was asked that question at an international conference in Barcelona last year, and Barcelona is the home of the Picasso Museum, and I had just been there, and I said, 5G is kind of like a Picasso. Different people look at it and see different things. But the fact of the matter is that 5G is this high-speed, low-latency connectivity that is crucial to whether or not we're going to be able to exploit the increased processing power that is offered us by the cloud.
Whoa.
You're taking action this summer, July 14, I think you said. But when will this spectrum actually be in consumers' devices? When will consumers actually notice this technology?
Well, as I said, I think we're going to see some trials in 2017 and roll out into some markets in 2020, which again is a schedule that will put us ahead of the world.
Okay, and you just referenced the moonshot. Talk to me about what most excites you. What do you think is the most exciting thing about the opportunities that may exist under a 5G network?
Wow, Tommy. As my friend Ron knows, I'm a huge history buff. And I actually have looked at had a hobby of studying the history of networks. And I think there is one truth that comes out of the history of networks. And that is that it is never the principal technological change that is transformational, but it is the secondary effects of that. And what I was trying to say is,
next time I'm gonna have to do a sketch or something.
Ideas, but we don't know what they're gonna be. But when you take that incredible process, I keep pointing to the cloud up here, that incredible processing power up in the cloud, and you make it available on a mobile, distributed basis down to the ultimate user, the ultimate, you. I didn't envision Uber out of 4G.
You probably wish you had.
Back in my venture capital days, I wish I had. But I know that there are things that we can't envision now, but they are. Let me give you one example that was fascinating. I was out in Silicon Valley last week. Here's a statistic I learned. We hear an awful lot about the connected car, right? All the activity for the connected car is going to happen up here in the cloud, because my car is going to have to know where your car and John's car and the school bus that's coming through, and all of this information is going to have to be processed with serious processing capability up here in the cloud, because you can't do it just down here in the car unless you want to put a huge computer in the trunk. The average household today uses about 50 gig of digital throughput. I was told that a connected car, in a month, I was told that a connected car uses 50 gig a day. And we need the throughput to be able to handle that kind of demand.
Okay, I'm from a very small town originally in Utah, rural area. How does that translate to beyond urban areas, to areas that may not have even 4G yet?
Yeah. The problem with our current distribution is that it's expensive to run the cable or the fiber out to remote areas. We have a subsidy program that helps carriers get over that, but it's still a significant expense, and there are still significant areas that you referenced that aren't covered. Wireless is helpful in getting there, important in getting there, but it has lower speeds and can be more costly. But as I said, Verizon is talking quite seriously about using these focused, high-speed, broad bandwidth shots into rural areas to be able to deliver the equivalent of fiber to your home for a price that is far more
I'll have
competitive and realistic than what we've seen
go back over that.
People who don't cover technology like myself are probably sitting here wondering this exact question. How are you able to create new rules for a technology that does not yet exist?
That is the $64 question, and what is it at the heart of what we're trying to do. We are not going to create rules for the technology. We are going to open up the spectrum. We are going to make sure that the innovation that is driven by competition is protected and promoted. And we are going to say, we're not in the spectrum, we're not in the technology rules decision, have at it.
All right. One last question on 5G. I'm going to move to a few other subjects, but you were at the helm of the wireless industry when it went from being a kind of a specialized service to a ubiquitous, indispensable part of everyday life for consumers and businesses. How does the next evolution relate to your experience then? Are we on the brink of something entirely new and different?
You ain't seen nothing yet. I think that's a yes.
I'm assuming.
No, I mean, you transform the nature of
Hey, Stargar.
connectivity to mobile, high-speed
Stargar.
connectivity.
I think I said that wrong
And,
the first time.
and innovation.
I'm making a
is always
3D robot type
about
ninja.
unanticipated,
I just didn't really start with a plan, so I'm not entirely sure what I'm trying to
and
do.
I think we're going to see them by the boatload. That's a technical term, boatload.
Gotcha. Thank you. The D.C. Circuit Court last week.
How have you been?
Yes.
I thought you'd never get around to that.
I've been trying to talk about 5G for a minute.
Golly.
The D.C. Circuit Court last week upheld controversial net neutrality rules, a big win for the commission. With this success, will you now publicly commit to stepping down as FCC chairman next year to pave the way for your colleague Jessica Rosenworcel's Senate confirmation?
I think the reality is this, that Commissioner Rosenworcel ought to be confirmed standing on her own. That I understand that
should be able to hear me a little better, I think, maybe.
For FCC chairman for the incoming president to have an opportunity to name the new FCC chairman. And I have told the Senate when I was asked this question in a hearing that as a fellow who studies history, I understand the precedent, and I respect the precedent. And let's see what happens. There's a little thing going to happen in November, and let's see what happens.
All right, let me
We'll get to November in a second. Do you think the FCC will revisit its decision not to regulate internet rates in the wake of the net neutrality decision from the D.C. Circuit?
Yeah, we're very clear.
Starg, are you still there?
That we are forbearing from ex-ante rate regulation and the need to file tariffs and all this sort of stuff, and that's not changing.
Presidential candidate Donald Trump has said he will reverse your net neutrality regulation. If he wins and limits FCC's authority, what impact will that have on consumers?
We've just been talking about the spectrum future, the connectivity future, and how this country maintains national leadership. There are three components. Spectrum must be fast. That's what we were talking about all through here. Increased speeds.
Let's see.
Access to spectrum must be fair. We need to make sure that in rural Utah, people are connected so they can enjoy the benefits. And access to spectrum has to be open. Because access to networks has to be open. Because we can't stand in a position where there are gatekeepers who are deciding what will or will not be offered to consumers. We're leading and will continue to lead the world because our networks are open and will remain open.
Alright, cool. So now I have room for... Okay, this needs to
For
change.
consumers to be able to access anybody they want, any place they want to go on the web, without permission, without blocking, without throttling, without paid prioritization, and with full transparency so that both the consumer and the edge provider know just what the heck they're getting.
Okay. And you didn't use the words Donald Trump at all in answering that. I just want to be present. Last last week, a coalition of pay TV providers and independent programmers presented the commission an alternative set-top box proposal that will allow consumers to ditch their cable boxes altogether while addressing the significant copyright concerns that the content community has raised about the FCC's proposed approach. Are you open to compromise and the closer collaboration moving forward with these companies?
Well, I think it's absolutely terrific that the cable industry came forward with this proposal. I've been asking them to do this. And I think that by coming forward, they indicated that a lot of the arguments that had been put up against our set-top box, free the box proposal, really fell by the wayside. That copyright can be protected, that consumer privacy can be protected, that small networks can continue to thrive, and that you don't have to rebuild the network in order to do this. So I think that what they've done is say yes. That the approach that the FCC suggested is an approach that can be taken. And what I'm interested in now is engaging in constructive dialogue with them on the specifics and just how do you write the regulations to achieve that. You know, there have multiple times in the past been situations where the industry has said they would do similar kinds of things, and it never came to pass. Let's make it come to pass now. The 99% of American consumers have no choice but to pay the monthly set-top box fee. It runs an average of $230 per household per year. The Congress said there needs to be choice. The Section 629 of the Communications Act says the FCC shall, not may or should think about, the FCC shall provide that there are competitive navigation devices for consumers, and we're going to follow through on that statute.
That was the head of the Federal Communications Commission, Tom Wheeler, speaking today live at the National Press Club in Washington. This is NPR News Presents. The moderator was Tom Burr, the president of the Press Club. He's the Washington correspondent for the Salt Lake Tribune. Tomorrow at this hour, you can hear a documentary about breast cancer.
Programming is supported by the Minnesota Nurses Association, professional nurses with the skills and experience dedicated to ensuring the safety and quality of patient care. Nurses put the care in healthcare. There are lots of ways to support Minnesota Public Radio, and one of them might be parked in your driveway right now. Whether it's a car, truck, RV, or motorcycle, when you donate your vehicle to NPR, we'll tow it away for free and transform it into the radio you love. Get more information or start your donation process at 1-800-227-2811 or npr.org/vehicle.
The number of abortion clinics in Texas is dwindling, which means fewer places for doctors to learn how to perform abortions.
The limited choices for our patients pretty much parallels the limited choices for our residents to get training.
I'm David Green, teaching abortion procedures in Texas. That's on the next Morning Edition.
From 4 to
whoops. Supposed to be Mark Sharp.
News. Also tomorrow morning we'll give you more updates on the nurses' strike at a line of hospitals here in the Twin Cities. Some weather updates, also regional news headlines following that as it happened.
Hi, I'm Carrie Miller. Join me and some of the smartest and most interesting guests around as we discuss the latest in politics and culture and books each weekday from 9 to 11 at nprnews.org/live.
I don't really know why this shaded or is shaded differently.
Did you know it's a non-profit service? To operate, we rely on various sources of funding, including local businesses, foundations, and state and federal grants. But our largest source of funding comes from listeners like you. Members provide half of what it takes to power NPR News, online and on the air. You listen, become a member today by giving any amount that works for you. Just click Donate. Thanks.
How do babies learn to talk? How does your GPS know where you are? Find answers to those questions and many more on Brains On, our science podcast for kids and curious adults. Subscribe to Brains On at nprnews.org/podcasts.
Hi there, I'm Carol Off.
And I'm Jeff Douglas, coming up on As It Happens.
This weekend at the funerals of people killed at Pulse nightclub in Orlando, members of a hate group showed up to demonstrate. And when they did, they found they were outnumbered by counter-demonstrators, people dressed as angels. I'll speak with one of those angels tonight.
And a face for radio. We're going to learn about the Dutch gentleman who emerged triumphant at the 2016 World Nose Championship in Germany, and his monumental honker, which has been described with admiration as a ripe potato.
Those stories and much more are coming up on the Monday edition of As It Happens.
Does this even
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Shay Stevens. The U.S. Senate has defeated 4 proposals to change the nation's gun laws, all revived or conceived in the wake of the Orlando nightclub shootings. None of the proposals could clear the 60-vote hurdle required to move forward. NPR's Susan Davison explains.
Republicans blocked 2 Democratic proposals to expand background checks and block people on terror watch lists from buying guns. Republicans say they could unfairly threaten constitutional rights. Democrats blocked 2 Republican proposals to delay gun sales to suspected terrorists and enhance the national background check system.
Jeez.
Democrats say the measures were too weak. Maine Republican Susan Collins is still working on a new compromise measure to stop people on terror watch lists from buying guns, but it's unclear if a deal will materialize or if it would get a vote. The House has no plans to vote on gun legislation. Susan Davis, NPR News, the Capitol.
Vice President Joe Biden warns it would be a mistake for the United States to try to wall itself off from the rest of the world. As NPR's Scott Horsey reports, Biden used a speech to the Center for an American Security to criticize the policies being proposed by Donald Trump.
I'm gonna work on this again tomorrow.
Fighting infectious diseases, or working to address climate change, Vice President Biden says
I really wish I knew
engaging with the world
more of what I'm trying to go for.
He points to the administration's outreach to
Hopefully the arms will be a little bit
US
faster.
standing throughout the Americas.
But if we build walls and disrespect our neighbors, we'll quickly see all this progress evaporated, replaced by a return of anti-Americanism, a coercive rift throughout our hemisphere.
Biden also defends the Iran nuclear deal and a proposed Asia-Pacific trade pact, both of which have drawn criticism from Donald Trump. Scott Horsley, NPR News, the White House.
The beginning of summer is bringing severe heat to the nation's southwest. The high temperature in Palm Springs today was 121 degrees. Jarvis Crawford, who runs a cooling center there, says it would be hard to survive without air conditioning.
You just deal with it. You go from your air-conditioned vehicle to an air-conditioned car or to an air-conditioned store.
Not an option, Crawford says, for many of Palm Springs' homeless.
The shade trees can only do so much when the weather's over 110 degrees. And so those folks we have to be careful with because we don't want them to pass out because of heat exhaustion or even heat stroke.
The heat wave is making matters worse for firefighters who are battling huge blazes in the southwest. Hundreds of homes near Los Angeles are under evacuation orders because of heavy smoke from a brush fire that's racing down slopes in the San Gabriel Mountains. On Wall Street, stocks closed higher with consumer firms among those posting the biggest gains today. The Dow Jones Industrials rose 129 points. The Nasdaq gained 36.
That's neat.
On Asian stock markets, shares are also higher.
So I actually want to go to Zeus.
Support for news comes from the NPR Shop, featuring t-shirts and totes designed to outfit public radio fans of every age. About to go public maternity shirts and organic cotton newborn onesies are both available at shop.npr.org.
From Minnesota Public Radio News, I'm Mike Moen. Dennis Hastert's attorney says the former U.S. House Speaker will report to a federal prison in southeastern Minnesota this week to begin serving a 15-month sentence in his hush money case. His attorney confirmed today that the Illinois Republican will report to the Rochester Federal Medical Center. Hastert has
So this is what it'll look like so far.
At sentencing, the judge overseeing the case told Hastert that the Rochester facility would be a good fit for the 74-year-old because it specializes in health care and is near the Mayo Clinic. Hastert is diabetic and suffered a stroke last year. The Rochester facility holds around 800 inmates from all security classifications. Minnesota health officials have linked 9 cases of salmonella this spring to handling young poultry. Mark Stile has more.
Chicks are often sold at farm supply stores in the springtime. Although they're cute and cuddly, the birds can pose a danger. That's because even clean-looking birds can carry salmonella bacteria on their down, feathers, or feet. The Minnesota Department of Health traced 9 salmonella cases this spring to people who handled young poultry. The bacteria can cause diarrhea, vomiting, and fever. The agency says anyone handling young birds should wash their hands. Young children contracting salmonella are more likely to suffer serious health complications. The agency says children under 5 years old should not handle chicks. Mark Stile, Minnesota Public Radio News, Worthington.
In the Twin Cities right now, partly cloudy skies, 70 degrees our current temperature. In Moorhead, it's clear and 66, and in Duluth, partly cloudy and 58 degrees. This is Minnesota Public Radio News. It's 10:06.
Hello, I'm Carol Off.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Douglas. This is As It Happens. Tonight.
Empty gestures. Venezuelans are looting and rioting, and as the country's already disastrous food shortage gets worse, so does the frustration and civil unrest.
He has a bone to pick with the EU. With the Brexit vote imminent, one British dairy farmer says his family is split on the issue, even though his farm stands to lose thousands in subsidies.
Earning their wings. To protect mourners from a hate group, members of an Orlando theater troupe dress up as angels and attend the funerals of people murdered in the mass shooting.
A cavalier attitude. For the first time in more than half a century, a professional Cleveland sports team wins a national championship, and no one is happier than the women in the LeBron James Grandmothers Fan Club.
A prince among macho men. With PM Dawn, the late Prince B created a sound that challenged the hip-hop status quo, even though at the time doing things the soft way was doing them the hard way.
And goodness knows, when the reigning champ returned to defend his title at Germany's World Nose Championship, his reputation preceded him, and his nose preceded it by some distance. As it happens, the Monday edition, radio that sincerely hopes that is nothing to sneeze at.
The hell are they talking about? Is there a way that I can make this?
Food. That is the chant echoing through the streets of cities and towns across Venezuela. And in recent weeks, it has been accompanied by riots and looting as the country's food shortage gets worse. According to one study, 87% of Venezuelans say that they do not have enough money to buy food. Girish Gupta is a Reuters journalist based in Venezuela's capital city of Caracas, and that is where we reached him via Skype.
Girish, how are people in Venezuela coping with this food shortage?
Well, they're really struggling. I've been here 5 years now, and it's only in the last couple of weeks, last 3-4 weeks, that I've really seen people hungry, simply hungry. There's no more to it. And I was at a food riot just a week or so ago, and it's incredible. People telling me that they hadn't eaten since breakfast the previous morning. One woman said in her 50s she'd only had 1 egg for breakfast the previous day. Another lady told me she'd had 1 mango the previous day. They were queuing up for anything they could get. And
Okay, seriously though, this time I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna work on it more tomorrow. Figure out what's
the poorest are
happening. Like this, I like this.
On the black market
This
exchange rates, yet things cost what they cost
so
in
much.
the rest of the world, in New York or in London. So it's incredibly difficult for people, and they really are struggling. And this is incredibly dangerous for the government here. We're seeing 10 or so lootings every single day, according to one NGO. It's one of the most violent countries in the world. People have guns, and they're using them, and people have died in these lootings.
Is it people who are in the poorest levels of income, or is it all across the board?
Well, this is a thing now. It's going higher and higher up the levels of income. Of course, originally it was the lowest levels, the ones who were a little bit richer, say me with my foreign currency earnings. We were okay because we could get stuff at inflated prices. Now, though, even those goods are drying up. So even someone like me, who's earning sort of a normal dollar or pound salary, is struggling to get a lot of things. And of course, the people earning maybe $10, $20 a month, it's near impossible.
When you go into the shops in Caracas, what do you see?
Alright, I'm still gonna work on it tomorrow. Alright, it was good hanging out with you guys. I'll work on this tomorrow morning.